What's up, my people? It is that time of the year again where YouTubers make videos about their favorite things that happened in a particular helio orbit, and people watch and care for some reason. So I decided I would jump on the bandwagon and do it myself. So this is going to be my list of the top 7 games that released this year. It was an amazing game, or amazing year, 4 games this year. So all of these games that I'm going to list in just a second are phenomenal. I can't recommend them enough. You should try them if you haven't already. But, you know, when we're looking at phenomenal release next to phenomenal release, we have to get nitpicky in order to separate them. So that's where we're going to be. That's what we're going to be doing. So I want to start this out by giving out like 4 honorable mentions, I suppose. These are games that were great, but just didn't do quite enough for me in order to be Game of the Year. Still phenomenal, but just didn't quite cross that edge. Didn't tilt the lever and the balance in their favor just enough. So my first honorable mention would be Smash Bros. Ultimate. This game's phenomenal. I love it to death. Single player is great. Multiplayer is amazing. If you have a Switch, you either already have this game or you're planning on getting this game. It's phenomenal. It's great. But for me, fighting games are more of a niche market. It's a great party game, but I'm also a very narrative heavy player. So usually when I'm looking for what's going to be the tiebreaker, what's going to separate out these games, usually for me, that narrative element is very important, which will come up again in a moment. As for my number 6 choice, so my second honorable mention, I decided to give this to Celeste. I mean, this game's great. It's a narrative platformer that's very difficult. The art design's great. The music's great. Everything about this game is very, very well made. And it handles some really intense topics in a very, very mature and meticulous and careful way. It's very, very well crafted, and I can recommend it fully. The reason that it didn't get higher up on this list is just because it is more of a niche title. And for me, it just, you know, compared to the other games on the list, it just wasn't quite as impressive to me as those. But as an indie game, it's absolutely phenomenal and deserves all of the laudations it's received. So props to the Celeste team. My next honorable mention would be Assassin's Creed Odyssey. One of the best Assassin's Creed games that's ever been released. Bite me. I honestly believe that. Is it better than Origins? I'm not so sure. I just love ancient Egypt, so that's a big tiebreaker. That's a big factor for me. But either way, this game is undeniably huge, very well built. It's well designed. For me, one of the big factors that kept it from getting higher up on this list, though, were the monetization strategies that Ubisoft employed with microtransactions, XP boosts, and the like. That's something which I understand this is a very expensive game to make. You know, we're looking at like 3,000 people working on it for a few years. So it's not easy to just throw out for $60 per copy. But compared to some of the other games, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, I don't think that that's necessarily an excuse. And if we're going to compare them to each other, I think it makes sense that the game that didn't put those microtransactions into the single player campaign should win out, and that should be a good tiebreaker. That just makes sense to me. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that down below. And then my fourth honorable mention would be Spider-Man for the PS4. Now, this might rustle some jimmies or feathers or rumble your undercarriage, whatever it does for you. Maybe I don't even want to know, but whatever it does, Spider-Man's great. I enjoyed, like, the 25 hours I spent playing that game were very, very fun. I enjoyed them immensely, and I can recommend the game to you if you want to play it, especially now because it's usually on sale and you can get it for like $40 depending on where you're looking. So for that reason, I can recommend it. Where I think it just falls short of some of the other games we're about to talk about is in the total volume, in the dynamic systems that it uses. Pretty much it's a Spider-Man game. It's 25 hours of really fun Spider-Man gameplay, and it kind of falls into the expectations that you would come to expect from an awesome Spider-Man game. But it doesn't do anything crazy different. It doesn't risk a whole lot. It's very, very Spider-Man, and that's great. That's why it's awesome. That's why it's in the top 4 of this list, but it's just not enough to compete with some of the games we're about to discuss. So that brings me to the top 3. And this was really hard up until about like 45 minutes to an hour ago. I was still swapping these around in my head. They're all amazing games, and that's just to say that all of these are phenomenal, and you should try all of these. But my top 3 are Monster Hunter World, God of War, and Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, not necessarily in that order. We're going to keep the suspense there for a minute. But when I was trying to balance these out, I had to consider total volume of content, the risks that were involved, the narrative structuring, all of those things. which is why my number 3 choice ended up being Monster Hunter World. Now, I think that Monster Hunter is very well built, and I think it's phenomenally well made, and I think it's a game that most people should play. I even just made a video on it saying that even though it sold like 10 million copies and it was Capcom's most successful title, it's an amazing game. I think most people set it aside too quickly, and I don't think enough people have played that game all the way through to really get out of it what it offers. And that's true of a lot of Japanese RPG style games, but still, it's so well made. It's phenomenal. But for me, it's lacking that narrative that I find so important, which we mentioned earlier, and that's why it came in third as opposed to the top 2 choices, which are God of War and Red Dead Redemption fighting it out, which are both obviously narrative-focused titles. Now, going between these 2 games was really difficult. Obviously, there's a ton of content, like 70, 80 hours in Red Dead Redemption 2. God of War is like 25, 30 to 40 hours, depending on how much of the side stuff you play and how much grinding you want to do to upgrade your armor. Overall, though, when I was thinking about this, I had to ask myself, what game challenged itself the most, risked the most, did as many crazy things as possible? And for me, it was pretty transparent. You know, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great game. It's one of the best games of the year. It's one of the best games that's ever released on this generation. But for me, it's a Rockstar game, and it is a predictably awesome Rockstar game. It doesn't change much about the system that Rockstar's developed, but even though it's still very, very similar to every other game that Rockstar's released in the last, decade, it's still one of the best games that has ever launched. And that just goes to show you how amazing Rockstar is. But when we compare it to God of War risked a lot. God of War reinvented a formula that was already established. God of War changed from an over-the-top, arcadey hit and smash, run and gun combat melee gore fest. And they changed that to a third-person narrative, carefully structured, story-based experience, which, if you had told anybody that 5 years ago, that's where they're headed, I think everyone would have laughed at you. And nobody would have expected it to turn out as well as it did. This was a passion project. This was something that was really risky. And if you listen to any of the development diaries that were put out by Cory Barlog or any of the other producers or developers, Sony didn't even believe in this project to begin with. Sony was even iffy when they were being shown the first dev diaries and development vlogs. And I think that just goes to show how phenomenally well made this is. And I think for that reason, it has to be praised. And that's why I'm giving my game of the year to God of War over Red Dead Redemption 2. Both amazing games. I can't recommend them enough. But for me, I don't think we can look past the fact that God of War reinvented itself, took a lot of risks, and is still amazingly well crafted. Red Dead Redemption 2 is phenomenal, and I love that game to death. I'm still playing that game, even though I've already finished the whole main story, which takes 75 hours. It's just a matter of risk, and I think Game of the Year should be given to the studio that was overall the most impressive, took the most risks, innovated the most, and changed gaming the most in the course of that year. I think Red Dead Redemption 2 was great, but I don't think it changed a whole lot of its established formula. It just did even more of that stuff even better. It polished the same jewel. It didn't recut the jewel into something new and different and interesting. And all this is to say, these games are all the best that were released this year. All of these games are some of the best that have ever released. We're nitpicking because this was such an amazing year for gaming. And Lord knows what we're going to get next year is only going to be more amazing. I can't even wait. My body is so ready. But let me know your choices, your picks for Game of the Year down in the comment section below. Let me know why you picked them and all of that stuff. I will be reading through every comment that comes in down below. Or if you want to get to me directly, you can tweet me at LukeStevensTV. Links to all of that stuff in the description box below. But thank you for watching. I love you all. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.